Welcome to this short video on Greek nouns. In order to understand how Greek nouns work, I want to first think a little bit about how English nouns work. As we know, English nouns can be singular or plural, and we call this number. So you could have a boy or you could have boys. Same noun, one is a single boy and the other is more than one boy. We could also have words can have gender. We especially see this when we're thinking about pronouns, he, she, it, they, and they can have case. And what we mean by that is a noun can be used as the subject of the word, or it can be used as the object of the word, or an indirect object, and so forth. The same is true of Greek nouns. So let's go through each of these categories in a little bit more detail. So we have number, singular and plural. In English, in order to demonstrate whether something is singular or plural, we add on s or es, or sometimes we have an irregular form of a noun, which doesn't use s or es. So the example I gave before, boy, or we add an s, boys. Box, add es, boxes. We do the same thing in Greek. We add different endings to a word. So the word that we learnt last week, phonere, meaning voice or sound, if we wanted to show that there were multiple voices or many sounds, we would change the ending. So phonere becomes phonai, phonai. So that eta changes to an alpha iota. The same for the word cardia, another word that we learnt last week, meaning heart. If we wanted to change cardia to a plural, we add the same ending. It becomes alpha iota, cardia. Words in English also have gender. I mentioned pronouns, but there are other words that can have gender in them. For instance, the word host traditionally was a masculine way of using the word, and then the feminine addition would be hostess. Obviously, we don't use these sorts of terms that much anymore in contemporary English, but I think the point still applies. Greek also has gender. It's not quite the same as the way that we use gender in English, and they also have these three genders. So what we call masculine, feminine, and neuter, which is sort of more like a neutral term. It's not that, when you hear a word like cardia, which is a feminine word, that it means that hearts are, exclusive to females only. Obviously, we know that's not true. But this is how Greeks actually divide up the way that words are formed and the way that they decline. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. It's all about the pattern of the words. The next thing that words have is case. I mentioned before that you can have a subject or an object. And in English, in order to know whether a word is functioning as the subject of the sentence or the object of the sentence, we predominantly rely on word order in order to know that. So if I was to look at this sentence, the apostle rebuked the demon, it is very clear to me that the apostle is the one that is the subject, and doing the action, rebuking, they're doing that action to the demon. And I know that because of the word order. If I changed the word order and I said, the demon rebuked the apostle, the word order is then telling me that the demon is the subject and the apostle is the object of the verb. This is very different to Greek. In Greek, oh, sorry, I had another slide that I forgot that I'd put in there. Sometimes case can also be determined by pronouns, personal pronouns, and these are a little bit more easier to follow no matter where they are in the sentence. So for instance, if I use the word I am doing this, then I'm clearly the subject of the sentence, or we are doing this, then we are the subject of the sentence. But if I wanted to say that I owned something or something was mine, and when I wanted to use that, I wanted that thing to be a possession, then I would say this is my book. It's the book of me. It's my book. I am no longer the subject in that sentence, but the book is actually the subject. Or if I wanted to use an indirect object, I would say, I bought this book for you, or this book was given to me. That there is actually an indirect object. Or the dog bit me. Now me is being used as the direct object of the verb. So pronouns actually in English are probably an easier way for us to understand how Greek then uses their nouns. And what I mean by that is that I, my, and me are three separate words. And we wouldn't say me has a book. We don't use me in that context. We use I have a book. And so by using these different forms of the same word, we are communicating no matter where I put that word in the sentence. I'm communicating whether it's the subject or whether it's a possession or whether it's an object. And this is much more similar to what we see in Greek. Here is another sentence just to reiterate the point. So if the girl is the subject, we would say the girl hit the ball. If I wanted to express that the ball was my possession, I would say it is my ball. It is my ball. And if I wanted to make the girl or the object of the sentence, I would say the ball hit her. Again, we're using different words to express these different ideas depending on how the same noun is being used in the sentence. So in Greek, rather than changing the whole word like I, me, and my, what they do is they actually change the ending of the word. And we saw an example of this when we were looking at cardia and cardii. That's the ending of the word that's getting changed in order to communicate something to the reader. And these case endings indicate how the noun is actually functioning in the sentence. So there are four main cases. So in English, we talk about subject, we talk about possession, indirect object, and the direct object. In Greek, they use different terms for case. They use the term nominative, which is often the subject, genitive, which is often possession, dative, which is often indirect object, and accusative, which is often the direct object of a sentence. Now, I say often because there are obviously exceptions to this, and I'll go through these throughout the course. There is one more case, and it's called the vocative case, and we will talk about this throughout the session. But when we're learning our paradigms for a Greek noun, we don't actually include the vocative, and I'll show you why in a minute. The vocative is the case of direct address. So for instance, if I wanted to say, let's use the word Lord, okay? The Lord is our noun that we want to try and understand. And the Greek word for Lord is kurios. That is the Greek word for Lord. And so if I used kurios in a sentence in this exact form, kurios, then I would know that it is the subject of the sentence because it's in the nominative case. If I change the ending to if I change the ending to kuriu, change the ending there, I know that it is the genitive case. So it's something that belongs to the Lord. So it might be the cloak of the Lord, or it might be the love of the Lord. So now all of a sudden, because of this ending, I know that we're in the genitive case. Then another option would be that the word changes to kurio with an omega on the end and an iota subscript. And then I know, because of this ending, that I'm in the dative case, which means it's an indirect object. The Lord has now become the indirect object. I gave the hat to the Lord, indirect object. Or I could have kurion, on. That's a kurion. And all of a sudden, I'm using the accusative case. And so it would be something like, I love the Lord. I am the subject in that sentence, and the Lord is who I love. And so I would use kurion. So the word stays very similar, kurios, kuriu, kurio, kurion, but it's this ending that's telling us whether the word is a nominative, and often the subject, genitive, possessive, dative, indirect object, accusative, object of the sentence. This fifth one here, vocative, is the one that we don't see very often, and it looks like this, kurier, and the vocative case is direct address. And so if you saw kurier, it would be me directly addressing the Lord. So I would say, Kurier, Lord. I'm talking directly to the Lord, Kurier. And so that's the final case. And so often in some of the paradigms that we learn, the vocative and the nominative are actually identical. And so it's only context that will tell us the difference. But sometimes we have this epsilon on the end, and it's quite obvious that you're using the vocative case. Anyway, technically there are 5 cases, but when we learn our paradigms, we actually only learn the paradigms for these 4 cases. So in Greek then, because of these little endings that we have on the end of a word, it is these endings that tell us how a word is functioning in Greek. It is not the word order that is telling us how a word is functioning in the sentence. So this word here, apostolos, meaning apostle, if I have this os ending, apostolos, then this is in the nominative case and is most likely the subject. I'm saying something about the apostle. The apostle is doing something. The apostle is going somewhere. The apostle is most likely the subject of the sentence because of this os ending. However, if I change the ending to on, so now we've got apostolon, I know that this is no longer the subject of the sentence. It's the direct object. This on ending is telling me that it's in the accusative case. And so all of a sudden, something is happening to the apostle. The apostle is being led somewhere, or the apostle is being loved, or something is happening to the apostle. The apostle has now become the object of the verb. So here is a Greek sentence, and it's a nice simple one. Theos, this is a word. Some of these words are going to be in your vocab for this week. Theos means God. Agapa, sorry, my brain just went blank. Agapa means loves, God loves. Ton, cosmon, God loves the world, is what this sentence says. But it's these endings here that are communicating to me who the subject is in this sentence. World cannot be the subject because it's in the accusative case. Theos must be the subject because it's in the nominative case. So we call this inflection. It's when a word's ending changes, or actually also the start of a word can change, and we'll see that when we get into verbs. And so Greek is a highly inflected language. It is less of the time about word order and far more to do with the actual form of the word itself. Just like we saw when we were looking at pronouns in English, I, my, and me, 3 different words, all communicating different things about how the same person is functioning in that sentence. Okay, so when we're looking at a Greek word, both nouns and verbs, so we'll think about this for the next few weeks, we're going to look at what we call the stem of the word, so actually what does the word mean, And then we're going to look at what has been changed or added to the word. How has the ending changed and how has the beginning changed? Again, beginnings change when we get into verbs. And so these changes or patterns that we see in a noun is what we call a declension. Declension is just a fancy grammatical word for pattern of inflection. How does the word change? What is the pattern? And so we can categorize words based on how this pattern goes because there is uniformity across the Greek language. You will have lots and lots of words that decline just like the word theos or logos. So these words that have this os ending will often follow exactly the same pattern. So logos means a word and is most likely the subject of the sentence. And it's in the nominative case because it's got this os ending. Logos, logu. All of a sudden, we know that we're in the genitive case. We're looking at possession of or by a word. Logo, dative case, to or in or with a word. And logon, accusative case. This is the object of the sentence. Okay, so let's start by looking at what we call the first pattern or the first declension. And this pattern goes with the words that you learnt this week in your vocabulary list. So this here, phi, omega, nu. These letters together form the stem, so the very basic component of the word phone. Now, you would never see phone written anywhere because it's not a complete word, but it is the basic element of the word. It's sort of the rawest part of the word before we add an ending onto it. So once we add on our ending, this eta, we then can start to determine how the word is functioning in the sentence. Same is true of the word cardia. The rawest part of the word cardia is cardi, and then we add on an ending, this alpha. And so in our first pattern, first declension words, they are either have an eta ending or they have an alpha ending, an eta ending or an alpha ending. And both of these are feminine. Feminine. Okay, so an eta pattern or an alpha pattern. And so here is what it looks like when these two patterns actually decline. We'll start with the eta pattern. So we've got the word agape, agape, meaning love. And that was on our list this week, agape. When I want to say love and use love as the subject of the sentence, I use what we call the lexical form. When I say the lexical form, I mean the form that you will find in your vocabulary list. It's the dictionary form. But that word can actually change. Greek is a little bit like what I think of as Lego. You add bits to the word. You can add bits to the end. You can add bits to the front. You can add bits. This is the stem of the word, the basic part of the word, building block of the word, and then we add things. And whatever we add to the word communicates how the word is functioning in the sentence. So for the first declension words, we're going to add on these different endings. Our endings are what changes, and that tells us how the word is functioning in the sentence. So love, when we've got agape, it is love. Agapes, of love, it's the genitive. Agape with an iota subscript, don't forget that little iota subscript, it becomes dative. It's an indirect object. To love, by love, in love, for love. Ain, when you've got ain on the end of the word, it becomes the accusative and it is the object of the sentence. I'm trying to think of a way to put that into a sentence. I want love. I want love. I am the sentence. Want is the verb. Love is the object of my desire. Now we've got our plural forms. agapai with an alpha iota, agapone with an omega nu, agape which is alpha iota sigma, and agapas, which is alpha sigma. And so what grammarians will often do is encourage you to just learn these endings, because any word that starts like this, agape, well, not any word, majority of words that start like agape, right, in their lexical form will decline in exactly the same way. So all you have to do is learn these endings. Agape, agapes, agape, agapane, agapai, agapone, agapais, agapas. So these are the endings that we want to learn. Then we've got our alpha endings. So we have the word hemera, hemera. And again, we've got a very similar set of endings that go on to these alpha words. And so that's why these two things are actually put together as one declension, because there's a lot of similarity. So instead of ace, we've got alpha, as, alpha with the iota subscript, an, I, own, ice, as. Very, very similar. And you'll notice here that the plurals are identical. And really, it's only the vowel here that's actually changing, because the sigma's the same, the nu's the same, the iota subscript is the same. So they're the endings. And so for your first declension, you essentially just need to write out these endings lots and lots of times, write them out over and over again, and then you will have that first pattern memorized. So this is what you're memorizing. You're just memorizing these endings because they can be applied to all of your first declension nouns. And as I mentioned before, the nice thing is that the plural is identical. And the singular forms are really, really similar. Really, really similar. So this is what I want you to learn for the first declension. You've got a, ace, as, a, ain, an, I, own, ice, as. Then we've got our second declension pattern, which I used as one of my examples before. And these are this is what we call our Omicron pattern. You'll notice that these words have this little Omicron in them. Instead of the alpha eta, we've now got this Omicron. So they follow a slightly different pattern. So the word logos, we change the endings to communicate how the word is functioning in the sentence. Os, u, o, on, oi, own, ois, us. And again, we learn these together because they're very similar. Here's our teknon form. So instead of os, we've got on, we've still got u, we've still got o, we've still got on, and in our plural, instead of oi, it moves to an alpha. We've still got own, we've still got ois, and instead of us, we've got that alpha again. So two similar patterns in the second declension. This pattern here is what we call our masculine second declension. So these are masculine nouns. And this one here we call our neuter second declension, neuter. So again, what I want you to do is just memorize the endings. Os, u, o, on, oi, own, ois, us. And for the neuter, on, u, o, on, a, own, ois, a. So here are some rules that you can sort of take away with you in order to help you as you are working on memorizing your noun patterns. The first rule is that stems ending in alpha or eta are considered first declensions, and that's that first pattern that we looked at. The a, ace, a, ain, and then I, own, ice, as. Stems ending in the omicron are what we call the second declension. So they were our logos, and here's another example, ergon. We had teknon before. This is ergon, meaning work. And then there is a third form that we'll look at in a couple of weeks, and these are called these have a consonant in their stem, and they're what we call third declension words. And here's an example: sarks. So it doesn't have an omicron, it doesn't have an alpha or an eta. It's actually got this consonant at the end, and so it forms a slightly different pattern. So we'll learn that in a few weeks' time. Another really helpful rule to remember when learning your nouns is that every neuter word, remember they were in our second declension patterns, our omicron pattern, has the same form in the nominative and the accusative. So teknon, teknu, tekno, teknon. So your accusative and your singular, exactly the same form. And then again in the plural, tekna, teknon, teknois, tekna. Again, your nominative and your plural are identical. Now, while that makes memorizing your paradigm or your declensional pattern for teknon, meaning child, nice and easy, when you're actually doing translation, you've got to pay close attention, because you don't know whether this is the subject or whether it is the object of the sentence. And so you actually need to rely on the context in order to work that out. The third rule that I think is really helpful is that nouns in the singular dative, so singular dative, will always have this iota subscript. So when you see that little dash underneath your vowel, then you know that this is dative singular. It can only be dative singular. But remember, when you saw the pattern, hora looks very similar to hora with the iota subscript. And so you've got to pay close attention when you see that iota subscript. So it's a good indicator, but you've just got to pay really close attention to it. The other important thing to learn when you're doing nouns is parsing. What is parsing? Parsing is when you look at the building blocks of a word to try and determine how it is functioning in a particular clause. Remember how I said you'll have the base part of your word. This is your base building block. So for instance, you've got phone. That was the base part. And then we add things on. Different endings. Oh, sorry. No, that's the wrong ending. A or ace. And this is true of verbs as well. We have different building blocks that then get added onto words, and they change how the word is functioning in the sentence. And so when we're parsing, we're sort of pulling apart these parts of the word so that we can work out, okay, there's the stem of the word. What has been added on? Okay, this is the extra part. And so now I know that this word is functioning as the subject because of these parts that I've sort of pulled apart here when I'm parsing. And so these are the questions that you want to ask yourself when you are parsing a word. I always like to start here. I always want to start with, do I know the lexical form of this word? Do I actually know how this word looks in the dictionary or in the lexicon, which is your Greek dictionary, or in my vocab list, right? These are all the same things: your lexicon, your vocab list, your dictionary. Do I know how this word appears in my vocab list? I'm going to start there, because then I know what my base building block is. Then I can work out what has been added. I can see the parts. Then once I know what my lexical form is, or the word as it appears in my dictionary list, I then also want to think about the article. And we talked about the article last week. The article is also found in our vocab list. Remember I said to you, you'll always have in a vocab list phone, and then the article, right? Phone, and then you'll always have the article hey, right, next to it. And so I need to think about, okay, what is the article that goes with this? Because that's going to tell me the gender. That's going to tell me the gender. Hey is always feminine, always feminine. So I know that phone is going to be feminine. Then when I start to look at the ending of the word, this is the bit that actually changes in the word, the ending, I can start to determine the number. Is it singular or plural? If it is case, or what case it is, and then I can start to work out the inflected meaning. So let's go through that together. Oh no, my slides didn't work. Okay, hang on. Let me just, oh, I can't. Okay. Ignore this because it's not meant to be there. It's meant to be up here. It's meant to be up here. Okay. So here's a word, anthropon, right? I know that anthropon comes from the word anthropos. I know from learning my vocab that the way that this word appears in my vocab list is anthropos, right? And I also know from my vocab list that the article that goes with anthropos is ho. So this is my lexical form, anthropos. This article is telling me the gender of the word. I know that this is a masculine word. I know it's a masculine word. And so therefore, because of this os ending and because of this masculine article, I know that this is a second declension masculine noun. And so I can now go to my chart with all those lovely endings, os, u, os, u, o, on, oi, own, ois, last one is us. I can go to my chart and I can go, okay, where's anthropon, that building block? Oh, it's here. Okay, this is singular and it is accusative. So I'll show you on my second declension chart. This is the form that we're looking at. Now, we also have an on here and here. But how do I know that it's not a neuter nominative or a neuter accusative? How do I know that it can't be these? Because I know that the lexical form of anthropos is anthropos, and it's got the ha article. So it has to be masculine, has to be masculine. Articles never lie. You'll hear me say this probably 1,000 times throughout this course. Articles never lie. Articles never lie. So if I memorize this article, when I'm learning the word anthropos, I know that this is masculine. And it's also got this os ending. So it has to be a second declension following that os, because of the omicron, has to follow this pattern. And so when I see the word anthropon, it must be here. It must be accusative singular. So I'll just go through that very briefly one more time. What is the lexical form of anthropon? The lexical form, the form that we find in our vocab list, is anthropos. What is the article? Ha. The article is masculine. Therefore, this word must be masculine. It has an os ending, which means it must be second declension masculine, which means it has to follow this pattern. And the only on option in this pattern is the singular accusative. Singular accusative. So this is a second declension noun following the os pattern. It's masculine because of that hot article. It's accusative, which means that it's functioning as the object of the sentence. It's singular. And the lexical form is anthropos. And so if I was to give you the inflected meaning, and what I mean by that is, what does this mean when the word has been inflected, when the ending has been changed? It means man as the object of the sentence. Okay, let's do one more. The word tekna. The first thing I want to do is think about what is the lexical form of tekna. Tekna. The lexical form of tekna is teknon. Teknon. Okay, here we go. We've got this on ending, teknon. So I know it has to be second declension because it's got this omicron, and our omicron pattern is second declension. All right, so it has to be second declension. And I know from my dictionary that when I learn teknon, I learn it with this article. And this is our neuter article. Neuter. Neuter article. This has to be a second declension neuter. So I can now go to my pattern. There it is, teknon. Teknon, teknu, tekno, teknon, tekna, teknon, teknois, tekna. Tekna, tekna. Okay, so it must be plural. But look, the nominative and the accusative are identical. So tekna can technically be nominative plural or nominative accusative. So lexical form, teknon. This is a neuter word, and it has two options. So if I was to write out this, if I was to parse this word, it's a second declension noun. It's following this os pattern. It's neuter, and I know that because of the article. It could be nominative or accusative, has to be plural. The lexical form is teknon, and it means a child. But the inflected meaning, because it's plural, is children. Children, because it's a plural word. So this is a sort of briefer way to write this out when we were asking you to parse this. If I was asking you to parse this word, it's either a nominative or an accusative. It's plural, it's neuter, it's from the word teknon, and it means children. And I guess you could also say it's either the subject or the object of the sentence. And we know that because of this here. One more. Heimeras. Heimeras. This is a different pattern. We've got this alpha. Alpha, alpha. Okay, what is the lexical form of heimera? Heimera. 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 This is a feminine ending, isn't it? It's first declension. These are the alpha eta pattern. So it's first declension. And when we learn our vocabulary list, we know that it's heimera, hey. Yes, it's definitely feminine. Heimera, hey. And so I can go through my first declension pattern, and we know that it can't be this here, can't be this one, because it doesn't in its lexical form have an eta on the end. We know that heimera follows the alpha pattern, the alpha pattern. And so it's heimera, heimeras, heimera, heimeran, heimerai, heimerun, heimerais, heimeras. Oh, look, there's actually two options. It could be genitive singular or accusative plural. Again, we can only go off context. And so if I was parsing this word, it could either be genitive singular feminine from the word heimera, meaning of a day, or it could be accusative plural feminine, heimera, meaning days. And so the only way we would know the difference is context. Context. Okay, well, I hope this has helped you a little bit as you think about Greek nouns, and we will do a little bit more on Greek nouns over the next few weeks.